Hi, I'm George. I'm an alcoholic. If anybody would like to just stand up for a minute, I certainly get it. I mean, you've been sitting for a while. I totally get it. There were some folks I met this morning from San Diego. Where are you guys? Go ahead and raise your hand. There you are. Don't I look better? I normally roll in shorts and I normally roll in shorts and a Hawaiian shirt. It's totally different than, of course, how I rolled when I got here. That's for sure. I want to thank John, the chairman, for asking me, and Debbie Y for working with me to get this all set up. Bob R, who's not able to be here. Steve T for driving 700 miles to be here. Thank you. Richard and Patty. Troy K, the infamous Rob or Dave. John W, Dave E, James, Matthew, Rod M, Darren, Brent, Teresa, Mark D, Michael D, and Marie, and the No Bucks, No Bull men's meeting members. See, I'm going to be able to give a little copy of this CD at Christmas. And I'd like to thank Ed, too. Because when I first moved here, Ed helped me to speak for the first time up here, and it sure has opened up a whole lot of doors for me. So let me share with you about me. Like I said, I've been sober since November 30th, 1981, and I didn't come in on a roll. Some people, they get there at a young age. I had the street cred to probably join Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous and a lot of the other anonymous programs by the time I was 15. But I said, no, let's hold on here. That's quite a bit. And so I kept coming in and out between 15 and I finally sobered up, clean and sobered up for good when I was 18 years old. And you have to be a hard charger to get your entire drink and drug log into that space and time. But, I'm a hard charger. And I'm not one of those underachieving alcoholic addicts. By the time I got here, I had already ruined myself to a point where if I laughed, giggled, sneezed, I'd shart myself. And if you keep partying, you can achieve that too, and it smells to high heaven. And not only that, but I got logjam, and that's when you're thinking faster than your motor coordination can handle, you start to just go, and then you drop an F-bomb. Because the F-bomb word is the word of choice for young kids like me who are desperately seeking attention and whose mind is just going a million miles a minute. And one of the reasons why I was overachieving in my use of alcohol was because I wanted to turn off this mind, this machine. I have the disease of alcoholism, and the blessing is that I have a program of recovery. The downside is I have the disease of alcoholism, and I have a program of recovery. It's not that easy. So when I first got here, I'll share with you one of the things that really resonated with me, and that is when they started talking about Bill and Bob. And both boys were born in the late 1800s, 1879, 1895, up in Vermont. And if you're familiar with Vermont in the winter, it's very cold up there. And so all young boys are trained in, it's in like a diamond or a pyramid. In fact, if you look at your sobriety coin, it's eerily resembling this. But it shows you how to make fire. And they taught all young men at that time how to make fire. And it's fuel, heat, and oxygen. And when those three components are together, a spark will ignite the fire. And these two guys knew this stuff. I mean, and back then in Vermont, they don't have the luxury of the temperature control like we do now. They either had a fire going or they died of exposure. A lot of incentive to keep that fire going and know how to build one and know what it's made of. And it's interesting that they took that same ideology to with Bill and Bob. They didn't know each other, but when Bill sobered up for good in December 1934, it wasn't until he went and he met with Bob in May of 1935 The first, what Bob had was he had honesty and open-mindedness, but he didn't have willingness. But lo and behold, he goes out on another bender, and by the time Bill talks to him again, and as you know, that's June 10th, 1935, Bob had honesty, open-mindedness, and now he had willingness. And that triangle sparks recovery when you add the spiritual angle. That revolutionary moment that Bill had when he was talking to Ebby that night of December 14th into the 15th of 1934, when Ebby said, why don't you choose your own higher power? That's what Bill brought to Bob, and that is what sets this thing on fire. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how sick you are. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you're doing. If you have a disease like I do, and honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness is sparked by your ability to choose a power greater than yourself, all of a sudden some miracles could happen. Because, like I said, I know that's... you guys are all looking at me like, wow. That's interesting. Anyways, so for me, I had my family is quite actually normal in America. My dad has 3 wives. He's passed, but my mom has 4 husbands, and she is still alive. And there's various stepbrothers and sisters. But see, now I don't know if they drop off as a stepbrother and sister when the marriage breaks up. But anyways, it wasn't the hotbed of mental health, but it was people who were trying the best they could to get us through our adolescence, to get us a job, to get us self-sufficient. It wasn't, and so I was able to see that through steps. Originally, when I first sobered up, I didn't make it through the whole childhood without actually getting after it in a way that wasn't a benefit to my family. That's why I ended up in a group home at such a young age. And again, if you overachieve as a younger person, you too can achieve that. You go through the juvenile hall system, and then the juvenile hall system, you dink around with that, and you get a probation officer assigned to you. Her name was Mrs. Kinsinger. And Mrs. Kinsinger kept telling me, Georgie, you can do better than this. And I knew that. I shouldn't be getting caught. That was the problem. And so, but I kept getting caught. And then finally I achieved California Youth Authority, which is, the prison system for the kids. And when you have the disease of alcoholism, now let me paint another visual for you. You guys remember when they were launching like the space shuttles off of in Florida? Well, that big old thing that they built, this big space shuttle, and they got that all together, and then they take it down the launch pad. It takes days to get down the launch pad, and finally it launches. Well, that's how my alcoholism was. My alcoholism and my addiction was already being built before the time I ever took my first drink or did my drug. That just launched it. But it was all there. I was a full-on liar by the time I was like 7 or 8 years old. There was so many attributes that enhanced my alcoholism and addiction that by the time I did drink and do drugs, it was just launch. Was that a good analogy? Huh? So that all happened, and so then I'm in the California Youth Authority, and I got to go through Scared Straight. And the problem that they found out is that kids that were sick like me found Scared Straight to be a badge of honor. Yeah. And so when I had to walk around holding this gentleman's belt loop, and he got done peeing, and it's like, drip my dick, boy. Okay. And then he told me how he could make love to me, for a better word, anytime he wanted, because he was in for life. And if I ever came back here, I would be doing more dripping, and I would not ever fart again if it was up to him with any sort of noise. You see what I'm saying? Well, it really didn't scare me straight. I went back and I was like, yeah, whatever. I went, and I got to be on Channel 2 News in the Bay Area, and they thought it was a great, wonderful program. And We got free food. We got a nice air-conditioned ride in a bus on the way up. We got food on the way back. It was better than the normal routine that we were used to. They don't really do that much anymore. So what I did, though, is I was after it in that I found a quirk in the law that said if I had done certain things, I could be emancipated. And I don't want to go through a litany of my sheet that said that I should never be allowed to be an adult in any society, but it definitely there was proof there I shouldn't be emancipated, but I did follow along, and I took what was called a high school proficiency test, aced it. I took some other tests and aced them, and then I got a job, and I had a checking account and a savings account, and I was able to procure a vehicle. And so I turned all this in, and they went ahead, and I got emancipated, which was then my freedom, at least I thought. What it was my freedom to now participate fully as an adult in society. And by this time, when I got out, I found a little apartment up in Ben Lomond, California. And one of the things about Ben Lomond, California is it's one of the premier psilocybin mushroom areas in the world. And you can take that premier mushroom and you can drive down the 5 freeway to San Diego in a little area called Fallbrook, where they have some of the premier sensimillion in the world. And you can trade and you can make money and you can just drive all day. And I had a little Pinto with a moon unit on it. And I had a CB and I just thought, man, this is life. I was actually making money doing this. And the guys that were dealing with me, they just thought it was great because I was fearless and I was just happy because here I am. There is no responsibility and everything. So anyway, so I'm up and we're harvesting a cash crop in the it's Boulder Creek area. It's up in the mountains, and they came in to detour this event from going on, and they had lights going on, and people were really upset that we were, harvesting this crop, and they wanted, I'm sure, to get more names and numbers and get to know us better. Well, I see that one of the cars is left going, so I decide I'm going to get out of this place. Now, mind you, I'm 16 years old. I'm emancipated. And I jump in the vehicle, and it's like, whoa, this is a cracky road. And so I ruined the cruiser. I took this out of my face off. I really was an awesome-looking young man prior to that. They did a good job, though. My wife loves me. And so I come to, and I spent some time in the hospital. I met with the appointed attorney gentleman, and he shared with me the felonies and misdemeanors that I had amassed in that little joyride that I did. And there were some people that were pretty upset with that escapade, and they did not just want me to live life happily ever after. They really wanted there to be some consequences. And but when I went to court, still bandaged up, the judge and my public defender told me that they had talked, and as we were going in, he said, "What branch of the service do you want to go into?" I don't want to go into the service. No, this entails cutting hair. This is not good. This is not good. And there's discipline. And no, I've been in prison. No, screw that. He goes, well, it's the only way that you're going to avoid not going back to prison because you're being tried as an adult. Because remember, you're emancipated. Oh, okay. Well, I like women. I like women in bikinis. I love the beach. Navy's always by the ocean. Let's go in the Navy. And that's how I got into the Navy. It wasn't, it was nothing more than that. It wasn't God and country and boy, I want to serve. No. So they got me in. Now what this did is that in my original boot camp and stuff, I got sober for a little while. And I don't know about you, but for me, the alcoholic and the addict that I am, anytime that I have periods of sobriety, things do actually go much better. I just seem to respond to life on life's terms with a much better attitude. So things started going good. I was able to test well. I ended up in a search salvage rescue unit, and it's a very macho activity. when you're in you get to ride in helicopters and people are in trouble and God, you are so cool. And I was stationed out of Hawaii, and I'm thinking, yes, oh God, I love this God. And I was in the unit, and because of my interest in the Navy, and I was 17, and this opened up. Thank God your taxpayer dollars were hard at work. It gave me the opportunity to hit bottom in a rate and a manner that I could never have duplicated here in the United States. Because we were doing operations, we'd go over to Hong Kong, and then we'd go over to Japan, and then we'd go down to Thailand, and then we'd go just around the Pacific Basin. And I've never been one of those people that it's like, oh, I won't try that. No, if it got me numb, I was all for it. And I enjoyed those days without remembrance. I thought that was cool. I'd wake up in the middle of a thing, and I'd be fully dressed and talking to somebody, and I'd be like, whoa, what are we doing? It was kind of like Star Trek for me, where I'd zoom, and yet I'd be in different clothes. And there was guys that I was stationed with. There were 60 men in our unit, and they did say, George, you should probably go to the Navy Alcohol Safety NASAP, Navy Alcohol Safety Action Program. And okay, whatever. I had seen Father Martin's Chalk Talks when I was in California Youth Authority, and it all just didn't resonate with me. I mean, here I am. I'm 17. I'm feeling I'm just the coolest guy I know, and I'm being able to just party like there's no end in sight. And I was in an amazing condition as well. But the drugs and alcohol really did start to have their way. I started to, not function as well. I started, like I said, I got to start to have a problem with my bowels as far as I was going when I didn't want to. That's so hard socially. And then I don't know about you, but for me, because of the throws and my drinking and stuff, it starts to burn your stomach out, and your breath is just dragging. It's like, hi. And it didn't stop there. I mean, I like I said earlier, I got to a point where I was stuttering and stuff, and this was just. But what my unit knew is that I started to want to die. And so when you're in a search, salvage, rescue unit, and you have this underlying thing, because at that point, my family I didn't really have any to speak of that were in contact with me. All I had was this unit, and my unit was actually starting to see the repercussions of my active alcoholism. And so they were starting to distance themselves from me, which is good. I mean, I was a typical alcoholic. If somebody left their wallet out and there was $60 in it, I'd take 20. I'd leave 40 because I'm a principled person. If I would just, God, it was just sick, and of course it was affecting the other men in the unit. But they started to see that, and they started to distance themselves. I could feel them pulling away. They weren't laughing at me. They were hoping that those things that I ran into in danger, that I would die. But they were happy that I was doing it because they didn't want to do it. I mean, if you imagine, you're coming down off a helicopter into a burning boat. They don't, they got wife and kids. It's like, no, George, go ahead. You buddy. Have at it, buddy. And I would think, God, maybe this will be the day. Maybe I'll die today. And I thought that a military funeral would be it would exonerate me for all my sins or whatever I've done wrong. And I kept living. And I kept partying, and it just continued to get worse. And so by the time my grandfather, he was in the hospital, he was very ill, and this is in 1981, and I had been visited and given information about how to recover and how I should be recovering, and I didn't believe a bit of it. And I would go to meetings, and I would see old people, and I'd say, the only problem with you is you're not getting laid, so I'm not going to do this. And that was my take on all of 12-step programs. You people don't know how to party, and that's your problem, and it's not mine. I know how to party. And so I kept going after it. My grandfather, he gets sick. I get a letter through the Red Cross saying, you need to come home. So I arrive, and I don't really care about my grandfather. What I care about is the party. And I've brought fruits from the islands, and you just jump on a military transport. There was no checking baggage and all of that stuff. So I ferried all kinds of drugs from Hawaii, and because it went from Hickam to Norton Air Force Base. So I know where the family's at. They're visiting grandfather, and so I go and I ingratiate myself to stuff at their house because that's where they're at. And I knew people that had some stashes and some alcohol, and I wanted to get loaded. And then I took my dad's car, too. Now, when you're partying like I did, and I wasn't driving a lot, but I really liked the sound of a 280Z going 100 miles an hour. There was just something when I went into fourth gear. It was like, ah! And so I'm going down the street, Sierra Way in San Bernardino, and I'm doing about 100. And I was coming up on this Dodge minivan, and she was turning into her driveway, and she didn't realize I was coming up on her at about 100 miles an hour, and I teed her. And as many of you know, it's always the guy who's loaded that walks out of these situations. Just, I'm like, wow, that was a bummer. Hey, are you okay? And I felt the lady. I knocked her vehicle about a block, and people were coming out of the homes and stuff. The car I was driving, my father's car, was totaled. I grabbed the drugs that I had with me. Of course, that's an important commodity when you're in that kind of situation. It's like, whoa, where's the drugs? Where's the alcohol? Some of that had spilled, but I was good with that. So I went, I checked her out. She seemed like she would live, and I did have precursory medical. And I went running, and I ran down and I reported the car stolen because in my magical mind I'm thinking, that's a great alibi. And so the San Bernardino police, they roll on this, and they talk to me for a little while, and I tell them this, heart agonizing story how I've traveled from afar, and I just want to see my grandfather who's dying, and Lord, I don't know if he's still alive. I need to get there. And he goes, well, son, the story that you're telling is good, but the glass on your pant legs tells a different one. At which time I hit him. And it was on. And he drops, and then his buddy's coming out of the car, and he's calling for friends and neighbors. And then him and I get into a scuffle, and then more units show up. And, boy, it was quite an exciting evening. I just remember when it all came to an end, there was a 45 on the pavement near me, and I'm thinking, should I grab it? And I hear a lot of clicks, and it's like, no, I'm good. So anyways, I faced quite a few felonies and misdemeanors, but they took me in. The chief of police was an ex-Navy guy. And mind you, this is 1981, and there wasn't this bureaucracy like there is today. There was still like common sense within the military and law enforcement. Like a chief could talk to a captain, and they could negotiate how to deal with this, rogue sailor that just got out of hand. And they did that, and they did charge me, but they agreed that I was not a flight risk, that I could be sent back to my command. Well, by the time I got back to Pearl Harbor, I hadn't had anything to drink or any drugs in like probably 18 to 20 hours. And if you're an alcoholic like me, stuff starts going bad when you go that long without what your system's used to. And my pancreas starts burning. My liver starts being on fire. My stomach's on fire. I am starting to just have emotions like you would think something personal to me had died. I was like crying, and then I'd like start laughing because I'd think of something crazy. And all of this was going on, and by the time I got off the plane there, the people could see visibly I was not okay. I mean, sweating, I was nasty. The whole problem with my pants and their smell, nasty. They just knew that I wasn't ready to just be taken back to the base. So they're taking me to the hospital, and of course I don't remember this, but I'm told 2 weeks later when I do start to remember things about what happened, I thought a hawk flew in and started talking to me, at which time I'm trying to get this hawk out of the room, and I am decimating this room, at which time I got a smartly fitting jacket. And that is what I woke up to with my captain and this gentleman, Paul S., who was from my unit. I wake up to them just looking at me, shaking their head. You know, what's going on? And they told me all that had happened the last few weeks. Apparently during that time, I had really severely some real physical breakdowns, which, you know, I was going to live, but it was close. That I was facing a lot of time in prison with the San Bernardino Police Department, and that I was also going to go do time in Leavenworth because I would have been considered unauthorized absence all the time I'm in civilian prison during that time. So it was potentially 25, 30 years of time that I was going to do. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to receive a bad conduct discharge and all this stuff. I mean, my life was now totally zero. And for me, what a wonderful thing, because if I would have had one more ace to play, one more card, one more story to tell, one more lie that I thought would get me by, God, I would have played it. But it was over. The jig was really up. Yeah. Bang. So my captain is there, Paul's there, and Paul said, you know, so this is all going to happen. Do you think you finally, do you believe you have a problem now? And I said, yeah, I really do. And he said, well, what we'll do before you're, you know, released and all this stuff, we'll send you through dry dock. Okay. And so that's when I went with a willingness. And you remember, like I said earlier, I had honesty, I had an open mind, but most importantly now I had willingness. And I was really willing to go to any length because everything I held sacred was now gone. Being in that unit was the last thing that was important to me on the earth. Having those men in my life was the last thing I had, and now I had nothing. And so I went through this dry dock, and I was checked in October, and then on an evening, it's a Sunday, November 29th, they still at that time in Pearl Harbor, they sold beer in the laundry facility in the like a soda machine kind of thing. And we had found a roach to smoke, and we knew where to get the beer, and so we climbed out of this place, and we went over, and they had said that we were on antabuse, but we thought it was kind of like saltpeter, that it was all a myth. And so how we did is you get a beer, a Budweiser out of the vending machine, and you had your knife, and you would shake it up, and when you tap that little tab, you hit your knife in the back, and it just like that. So I let Brad go first. Well, Brad starts foaming. That's not good. And so I dialed 911, and while they were, and I didn't wait. I said, Brad, good luck, buddy. You'll be okay. And so I went and crawled back into the place, and then I crawled underneath the building, and I thought I'd smoked this little roach thing, and I'm sitting there, and cockroaches in Hawaii are very big. You could actually saddle some of these things. And I'm underneath this building with dead leaves and cockroaches, and I started crying, and that was it. And I went in and I wrote a note to myself, and I said, Dear God, I swear on, and I named my family members and my dog Tippy, I'll never use drugs or alcohol again. And then just because I had the acumen of a 6-year-old boy at that time, even though by this time I'm 18, I put that note underneath my pillow that night, and it was gone the next morning. I have never had the urge to take a fix, drink, pill, nothing since then, which is a miracle unto itself. And that's one of the first miracles that was given to me through this program of recovery. That God, as I didn't understand at the time, really availed me that first day without the urge. That life on life's terms could be solved by something other than a drink or a drug. That was a big first step for me. And then what happened was I went in Monday morning and I told this gentleman, his name's Pete Peterson, and he passed away here this last year. He was the head of the recovery unit. And I told Pete that I had been there with Brad when all that had happened, and I tried to smoke a joint, and it didn't happen. But anyways, today I was going to be, and I knew I was probably going to be put out of this dry dock. which meant I was just going to expedite my time to go to prison and all that, because I figured I was going anyways. For whatever reason, and I told him about the note, he went ahead and said, you know what, George, I'm going to keep you. We'll see what happens. If you so much as do this again, of course, we're just going to send you back and you're going to start your sentence and stuff. Okay. And that was the second miracle that happened. Now, on January 17th, 1982, the third miracle happened. I was able to go to court, and the judge looked at everything, and he asked me what I had to say on my behalf. And mind you, I'm still stuttering, but I wasn't dropping F-bombs in front of this judge. I was telling him, okay, yeah, I have a disease. And he's like, well, what kind? I said, it's alcoholism. And I showed him the little dance ticket that I had. I'd gone to a New Year's Eve sobriety dance in Oahu. And I said, and I'm going to stay sober. And he said, so does it matter if I'm going to send you to prison? No, I have a disease. And I told the judge this, and his name, anyways, good guy. And I'm saying that because he drops the gavel, and I just expected that I was going to be let out in handcuffs. And he says, I'm going to give you a five-year suspended sentence. If you so much as have a bad eval, if you so much as run afoul of the law, you'll come back and face the full force of the law. And these felonies and misdemeanors will be reinstated. And how much do you make a month, son? And I'm like, $400. And he said, well, I'm going to charge you $50 a month for the next 6 months. Okay. And that was it. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, are we kidding? You mean I'm free? And they said, yeah, you can go. Okay. So I flew back to my unit. Now, they were not happy to see me. They were like, what, dirtbag? What are you doing back here? And I told them, well, they suspended my sentence for 5 years. And they were not happy. And they explained to me that as a result of me blemishing the reputation of the unit, that I was going to have to follow a certain protocol, is what they called it. And that protocol entailed me cleaning the inside of the sewage bilges on our little search salvage rescue ship with a 5-gallon bucket, rubber gloves, and a mask. And just scrape that with a little metal scraper. And then I would also have the wonderment of stacking and restacking 5-gallon paint cans. I would do it like 15 feet away, stack them up, and I'd have the chief come over and go, what the hell are you doing? You told me to stack them up right here. They need to go over there. And you'd think I'd look like Popeye by now, but I mean, I did that. And they screwed with me, and thank God they did. Because my early sobriety was uncomfortable. It was hell. I had to go by order to a meeting every day. I did not have a bike. I did not have a car. I had nothing. But to them, they didn't care. You've been creative. You used to find a way to party. You will find a way to that meeting. And you will have somebody at that meeting sign that you were there. And you will be back on command, back at this base, and you will check in by 10 p.m. So pretty much there in Hawaii and Honolulu, and I was in good enough shape to where, I was able to run. But the buses don't run as late as some of the meetings would let out. I certainly didn't have time to talk after the meeting. But I had to go to a meeting every day. So my first year was under duress. And it wasn't buttons and bows, and I didn't stay afterwards to talk, and I didn't get there early. They would work me right up until the time they thought it would take me to get to a meeting. And those men, now that I look back on it, they really did love me when I couldn't love myself. Because it was through that, and after a few months, they saw that I was really serious, that I wasn't BSing, that this wasn't one of my little schemes, this wasn't one of my little bogus stories, that I really did believe I had this disease. And I started working the steps, too. And what that started to entail was understanding that drinking and doing drugs just wasn't it. That I had to become whole spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, and financially. All those areas. That my recovery wasn't just going to be, well, you just didn't drink today. Good for you. I was going to have to be responsible for myself now. And I was going to have to become a better man than I had become under the auspices of drugs and alcohol. Because if I was able to blemish their name under those auspices, I was going to be able to enhance their name under this auspices of sobriety. And I didn't have any pity or any. That's how it was. So when my opportunity to get out of the Navy came up, I did. And I still had a little bit of time left on that 5 years. But I was able to get myself into the university, tested well. I had done pre-work so as to be able to do that. And from having a California high school proficiency test and taking some pre-classes, I was able to get in. And I was not able to get loans, so I had to work jobs. And I had a sponsor who said, I don't care to hear your belly aching. I care to hear of your successes. And we will continue to work these steps that you're working. And the inventory of the past, if I'm still talking about it, like i.e. still blaming my family, still blaming some of the guards in the group home, still blaming some of the idiots in the military system, that there would be no more use for that. Either you've inventoried and taken care of it or you haven't. And we're tired of hearing about what you haven't taken care of. So you need to start taking care of it. Dang, that's hard, isn't it? Shouldn't he just have been a little more softer? Like, God, you're doing such a good job, George. Look at you. You've come out of the service and you're putting yourself through college. You're a good boy. No. This guy was on my ass like it was bad. So anyways, thank God for that, man. And he also said, and you are going to have to start doing your share to repair the damage you have done in this community. So he had me volunteering at the YMCA because I was a search, salvage, rescue swimmer. So I was able to help out there. And then I started helping out the kids, troubled youth, to go in and meeting with them. And then I was doing my studying, and I was working at the Safeway grocery store. I was working at Shell gas station, and I was doing cleanups in apartments for extra money. And plus, I was going to meetings. And during that time, we helped start the Inland Empire AA convention. It's in its 28th year this year. And I mean, it was just on. Now, mind you, by this time I'm in my 20s. I mean, God, if I could be in my 20s today. Yes. I mean, just that energy, that 3 hours of sleep and good. I can't do that today. I get all soggy about 9 p.m. Thank God Channel 9 News comes on at 9 o'clock here. So anyways, I started doing all of the areas. Spiritually, I started to grow my understanding. I checked out different religions, and I didn't find any that fit, but I kept digging. I kept seeking to expand. And by the time 1989 rolled around, I had done a lot in the community. I was graduating from the university, and I was honored as Citizen of the Year. And that was a big deal in this community. And after that event, my sister came up and gave me my dad's home phone number. And that's after 9 years of sobriety, that's when I got to call and talk to my dad for the first time. And I know that sounds harsh, but I had been hell in these people's lives. I mean, they really were just trying to insulate themselves from the bad seed that I was as a result of alcoholism and drugs. But they really said, you know what, you can call. Well, thanks. And my mom showed up at the event, and I'd maybe talked to her in total about 45 minutes over the prior 12 years. And she said, I really want you to know I'm proud of you. And that was a big night for me. Of course, my alcoholism, immediately after those niceties had occurred, said, my folks, those rat bastards, they're trying to ruin on my parade. They're trying to act as though they helped me do this. I did this. My sponsor's like, no, your disease is flaring up, George. Yeah, you just need to be glad about what happened. And so then I was, the real estate market started crashing, and that's in the early 90s, and I had gotten my real estate license, and it had done very well in the late 80s, but early 90s not so much. And so I had to get what I call a real job again. And not that real estate it's a definitely difficult job, but so I looked at other things, and I ended up taking my military training, and I started volunteering with the police department. And because I have skills. And I had a lot of training, and so I started to help with the search, salvage, rescue team, and I started to teach these guys other ways to go about doing their job, and it all started to work together, and I started to find women. And then I was offered to, because of there was a war going on at that time, to go back in and become a naval intelligence, and so I did that, and that's why I was in San Diego a lot. And all this time, mind you, my hair's been short for a long time. So when I retired here 2 years ago, I said, screw it, we're growing it. See that? But anyways, so I started doing that, and that started working out real well. And then a series of events came about, and so I've always wanted to do something big. And I thought that even though I had become Citizen of the Year, I wanted to do something big. So I thought I'd run for Congress. And why I was going to run for Congress is because I've always had this childish notion that I could save the world. I was saving people, and now I was going to try and save the world one country at a time. And by God, I'd start with this one. And so I file all my paper. I get all my paper out, and the newspaper welcomed, this young man, and so I get a call from the reporter, and it's on a Saturday, and the Sun newspaper at that time had a Sunday readership of 1.3 million, and I had spoken at conventions, and she called and she said, "I'm going to play something for you, and I want you to confirm or deny whether this is you." And she clicks into that where I'm giving this same kind of speech, and I said, and I was equal opportunity. I did psilocybin mushrooms, heroin. I tried acid. I tried whatever was put in front of me. Stops the tape. Is that you? Yeah, it sure is. That was me speaking at a convention. Yeah, well, we're going to run with that story tomorrow. Oh, she goes, "What's your comment?" I said, "I'll drop out of the election." And it was still in the primaries. And my total inside, if you've ever seen a recapturing of what happened in Nagasaki, Hiroshima, that's my alcoholism and my addiction and what little bit of a man I was wanted to just scorched earth. God, I was pissed because I didn't think it was fair. Now, I called my sponsor, and I'm really sure that this is going to be the time where I'm justified at this anger. This is going to be the time. I'm right. Those bastards have wronged me. He said, "No, what you need to do, George, you need to refund everybody who gave money to your campaign, and you just need to go on living like you were, and that's just obviously not what God has chosen for you." Bastard! Call him back. Okay. And that's what I did. And I did not seek revenge. I was looked at awkwardly at grocery stores. Everybody in the valley knew about it. There were people that I repaid, and I wasn't able to repay it all right away, but I did. And ultimately, what people found out through that, as it turns out, and this is where God works in my life, and if you're new and find a power greater than you, it will work in yours as well, so now we fast forward a few years. One thing that came out of that event is it turns out I'm an honorable man. I didn't try and point fingers. I didn't try and do all that I wanted to do. Now, nobody else, you guys know this, that my sponsor saved me from being myself at the time. But what happened was I just ended up accepting the situation and say, yes, I did. That's me. I had addiction, alcoholism. Yes, I've done horrible things. I don't anymore, but I can understand where I'm not a benefit to the community in that capacity. So we'll find something else. Well, you should have seen my surprise when all of a sudden the police commissioner is getting busted in San Bernardino. And it turns out this guy's accepting the tickets from the Indian gaming casino, and he's got officers in the department that are running prostitution ring, and some of the newer officers are all of a sudden, driving Cadillac Escalades on that pay. And there was a lot going on. And they needed to replace the police commissioner. Who do you think's an honorable man in the community? That's right. Now, two of the officers that I'd gotten in a fight with in 1981, they're still on the department. And I'm introduced as the new police commissioner for the city of San Bernardino. And Tony's like, "You're kidding." I had a good reputation because, like I said, I'd been helping youth, troubled youth. I had not lied about the reality of where my disease has ever taken me. I was helping people, helping the community. It seemed natural. And I brought a level of stability back to this department that was in disarray until I got in and arrested a sergeant who was running a brothel out of the North Substation, at which time 20% of the department either retired, lateraled, or left, which when you have 300 officers, obviously that's 60 officers down, and that means the hardship on the other officers takes its toll because you still have the same shifts. We had a tempo of about 1,000 calls per day of service in San Bernardino. It's actually larger than Boise. And it's a very active department, and the officers who all they did was do their job correctly are now upset that all their other people are gone. Although they're kind of happy on a conceptual level that the bad guys are out of there, it didn't help that they're working longer hours. And there are some of the officers that stayed, and they wanted to test to see if I was doing this as a political stunt or if I was really this guy that, was like working this 12-step program. He's hanging out with addicts still. I just know it. I bet you he's got something up his sleeve. Now, mind you, another component here that you have to know too. Because of this program, Recovery, I have this wonderful wife that I've never cheated on. And it's not because I'm that kind of a moral man. It's because of this program, Recovery. And I'm just so blessed that I hadn't done that, because believe me, at that time, it would have come out. They sent hookers to the house and with T-shirts and said, "George left this at the house last night." They had gay porn coming to the house in magazines. There's people that they didn't take this, George is cleaning up, lying down. They were going to try and destroy the messenger. Screw the message that we are going to clean this up. They didn't want any part of it. And that I crossed the blue line by Van Drossen being arrested, a sergeant. Whew, that was not well received in any of the law enforcement circles. Many of the law enforcement leaders felt that I should have handled that a different way. And, that's what I did. That's what God, as I understood, led me to do. And I still went to meetings. But I did. I couldn't be around felons, and so I did have to start to be more conscious of that. But after about a year and a half, it got tremendously better, and we were able to get that department back up in really good shape. We reduced crime literally 30%, and that in a large city is a real attribute to the men and women that came and bought in. And they bought in just like you're buying in right now. You're giving me time to share my message so that I can stay sober, but you're buying in, and I so appreciate that. And I especially you coming from out of town, that's a big deal. So anyway, so that parlayed into other things. On 9/11, I was the youngest police commissioner in the nation, and stuff got serious in a hurry. Two of the people that were involved in that came through Loma Linda on a student visa, and they were living in San Bernardino before they dispersed. And I was part of the emergency management system, and it was instant education at something that you have to go through to get it. It's kind of like you ladies that have had childbirth. There's nothing that can replace that experience. It's like you guys that have had, a loss of a life, or all of us have had a loss of a life. It's education in a now sense. You can't fake this stuff. So that all happened, and by the end of my tenure, I'd become a very reputable police commissioner, and at the end of 2004, a gang member was shot by one of the officers, and it was said that it was an execution-style murder by one of our officers. And the retaliation was that they were going to kill the police commissioner or one of the top leadership in the police department. So I called the FBI, and I asked that I be availed the protection program. And they said, well, there hasn't been anything that's happened. And I said, oh. And I told them, you can read in the Sun newspaper, it's the October 23rd edition. Hello. They didn't care. So I was out on a ride along, and we pull over this gang car, and this gang member comes out of the car. He goes, "I know you. I know who Kelsey is. That's my granddaughter." And then he told me all the sexual ways he was going to cut her up. And I didn't know what he was talking about. But back to the Hiroshima nuclear, thing going off inside me. God, I just wanted to just shoot that human debris. But I didn't, obviously. But I knew that it was serious, and so I resigned. And here's how God has worked in my life. All the gentlemen that I was working and talking to regularly with at the time, other men came into their life to where they could go to. My wife and I, we had bought a home for like $69,000, and the market had climbed to where it was $270,000. And so we were able to have money to get out. And the federal government wasn't helping us, but our pick had hit that limitless load that this program talks about. I never have to rely on anybody else other than the power that I choose to call God. And it was sufficient at the time. And it got me, my wife, my family, my grandkids, the hell out of there. And I didn't have to rely on anybody. That all happened. And I mean, what a miracle. That is commonplace in the 12-step rooms among the men that I know to have found this program of recovery. Real miracles happening. So then we got to Colorado. Then Melinda, she got cancer, and we went through that. And that's always something where you're expecting them to die, and then they live. And then you feel guilty about all the times that you were thinking, boy, I'm going to meet her after she's gone. It's just horrible. I do love my wife a lot. She would be sitting there going, oh, God. So from Colorado, we moved on to Kentucky, and she got through that. She's a 4-time cancer survivor, and she's the world to me. But anyways, we got to Kentucky, and I started working as an officer with the Department of Homeland Security, and I have skills. And so I was on the bomb abatement detail during the Kentucky Derby, and just different things that I got to do and be a part of. And ultimately, I got a call one day, and it was this lady. She goes, "Hello, George." I said, "Who's this?" And she goes, "It's Sylvia Panetta." "Sure it is. Who is it?" "This is Sylvia Panetta." Well, and at that time, Mr. Panetta was the Secretary of Defense. And she said, "We'd like you to come out and be with us." Okay. They're really nice people. Leon's a good guy. Their dog Brownie's a good guy. A great dog. Sylvia is unbelievably structured. So we moved from Kentucky to their home is in the Monterey County area, and so whenever you're working with a secretary, you always stage from where they're living, and that was my that entailed my last year of active activity. I can't tell you what it's like to be me, to know when I come up here and I start talking to you about this human debris that I was as a kid, and then go all the way to working with the Secretary of Defense. That's an amazing thing that the step work, and God as I understand Him and sometimes don't, has done in my life. And along the way, taking care of everything. And so in 2013, when I retired, sure, there was a lot going on, and there was an opportunity to work with Mr. Biden, but I did not want to, not because of him, just because I don't want the responsibility anymore. I know it's a young man's game, all that stuff. And I still run in the morning and stuff, but I'm not all testosterone up at all. I don't want to fight anymore. I'd just shoot you. Like in Indiana Jones, the ninjas go, ah, and he just poof. That's about where my head's at, which is not good. But What I mean, the journey that these steps have taken me on, and then to my wife found the Boise, Idaho area. She's a wonderful researcher, and she found everything about it. And so that's how we got here. We didn't know anybody here. We have children that live in Portland. We have kids in Montana, Kentucky, and in Southern California. And she's quality living, good people, God-fearing group, low taxes, affordable. Yeah, I'm in. And that's how we ended up here. And what I did when I got here is I started interviewing men for sponsorship. That's how I first met Ed. And it was between Ed and Bill P. And I worked with Bill P. for a while. And here recently now I work with Colonel S. Anyways, Vaughn's, he's a Special Forces colonel and retired. And now I work with him. And he has just obviously all these men, whether it's Ed, Bill, Vaughn, they have just a hell of a program. And it's real world. You see, I just have what I call battlefield spirituality, and it's forged by seeing a lot of reality, knowing what men are capable of, and still believing that there's a power greater than us that will make it all turn out okay. And it happens. It happens all the time. That's one of the things I really liked about Bill. Bill W. is a coastal artillery officer. He was part of that group that ferried the dead from World War I back to the United States. And some of these guys got mustard gassed. And mustard gas takes all the oxygenation out of your body, so you become a black blob. And all you have is your tag. And it's a very gruesome sight. And here was the men that he'd been working with, hard-charging men, good men just like me, who ended up with mustard gas. And he had to live with that imagery for the rest of his life. They would call it post-traumatic stress now, but Bill had to deal with that all his life. And I can assure you, just with my own post-traumatic stress, I can work 12-step programs all day long and twice on Sunday. They have no effect on that. But it's my primary. So I need to keep my primary sickness in check and in remission, and then I can deal with these other areas that need attention. It's a powerful program for alcoholism and addiction. But as some of you know, it won't help your cancer. It won't help your post-traumatic stress. It won't help your diabetes. It's hard. We have an unbelievably hard disease, but we have an unbelievably effective mechanism in which to deal with it, life on life's terms, still daily. So that's why I still go to meetings. I still talk to men. There's a group of men sitting over here that I get to talk to regularly. And it's a miracle. I have the stepchildren and the grandchildren, and for a man who was considered dishonorable to being an honorable man today, it's just an experience not to be missed. And whatever you're facing, whatever challenge you have, you know what? You've got the right thing right now, and that is you have a power greater than yourself that's willing to work with you on the disease that you have and is willing to avail to you a life beyond your most wildest dreams if you work it. But you'll be given the strength to do it. I'm retired now. Hell, I'm 52 years old. Next month I'll have 34 years, clean and sober. I get to do this. This is amazing. I don't have an updated phone, as they will attest to. I still use this. It doesn't text. It doesn't, nothing. My wife has a Skype, though, so I get to see the grandkids that way. But I want you to have double of what I've been given. And all it takes is getting up in the morning, asking God to help you, as you understand God, to help you. Throughout the day, acknowledging that spot check inventory. Wow, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, and financially, I'm going off the deep end here. I need to go back. And then later on in the afternoon, be thankful for what I got. And in the evening, just review it. And if I screwed up, that's okay. I'll get a chance to do it tomorrow. I can repair the damage done. Don't let this stuff idly build up. I know a lot of men who, God bless them, they have not had a drink in a long time. But God help them because they haven't been working the program of recovery. And it's a horrible place to be when your sickness comes back in full bloom and all you are not doing is not drinking. You need to have that pattern, those attributes in place to deal with this disease that still wants to kill me. I know that. Because I can leave here this evening. I can call my wife on the way home and say, bitch, I hope you have something ready for me when I get home. I can call my children and say, you leeches, I know it's coming to December, but I don't want to hear none of your stuff. You need to start giving to me. And those little leech babies that you have, no, we're not doing any more this Christmas either. And then I call guys that I really cherish and guys that I get to talk to regularly and say, you know what, I'm pretty much tired of talking to you guys all the time. I'm just putting out. So why don't you just not call anymore? And then before I get home, just by those few calls, I'll probably think, you know what, it'd be good if I just use this pistol here to just take myself. But I'll go out sober. That's what I call how I work the 12 steps backwards. That's why I try and keep them up. Because I can go back through the steps down to one pretty much within a few hours. And I believe that today to be true. But the program of recovery, like I said, I hope that me sharing myself with you has helped you know that I didn't do any of this. It was a power greater than myself through this program of recovery that availed everything that's been given to me. And I didn't even cover all that's happened. But as time goes by, I'm sure you'll hear more. So thank you for letting me talk.